Eduardo Menezes' body was never found. Badge 1983 from the São Paulo Civil Police was the only thing left of him on that night of April 12, 2013, when the operation against drug trafficking in the Maré complex ended in a shootout. 10 years have passed. 10 long years in which Clara, his twin sister, faced grief without a grave to mourn at. It was a spring Thursday when Clara Menezes' life changed forever. The phone rang at 11:47 p.m. She remembers precisely the moment she answered, still drowsy, and heard Chief Inspector Martin's deep voice. "Clara, something happened to Eduardo." The sentence hung in the air like a verdict. That night, Clara felt her brother's life fade within her. They had always had that connection. What one felt, the other knew. But that night, she didn't feel pain, didn't feel fear. She felt only emptiness, a silence she couldn't decipher. The chief explained that Eduardo had participated in a high-risk operation. The civil police elite squad had surrounded one of the main drug distribution points in the Maré complex. The plan was simple: enter, capture the leaders, exit. Nothing in a police officer's life is simple. There was a confrontation. Eduardo was on the front line when an explosion devastated the building he had entered. Witnesses saw when he was hit. The building collapsed afterward. After 3 days of searching through the rubble, only badge 1983 was found. Partially melted by the heat of the explosion, Eduardo and Clara were 32 when he disappeared. Children of a retired police officer, they grew up hearing stories of heroism and sacrifice. Their father, Antonio Menezes, served for 35 years and raised the twins alone after his wife died during childbirth. He was a man of few words, but infinite love. Eduardo followed in his father's footsteps, while Clara chose the path of letters, becoming a university literature professor. They were different in their choices, but identical in their obstinacy. When Eduardo decided to join the police force, Clara knew there would be no turning back. Her brother had that look, the same one their father had in old photographs in uniform. So physically alike that they confused strangers, the twins complemented each other in everything else. Eduardo was outgoing, always ready with a joke. Clara was reserved, preferring to observe. He protected, she advised. He faced the world with an open heart, she with careful words. On the day of the symbolic funeral, for there was no body, Clara remained silent. She didn't shed a single tear. Her father, now elderly and worn down by years of service, collapsed over the empty coffin. Eduardo's colleagues stood at attention. Camila's mother, the fiancé he left behind, fainted during the ceremony. Clara merely observed everything as if watching a film. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. Eduardo wasn't in that coffin. Eduardo wasn't anywhere. And that, more than his death, was what tormented her. Years later, she still tried to explain to her few close friends, "It's not the pain of losing him that consumes me. It's not knowing. It's waking up every morning and thinking, will today be the day I discover what really happened?" The first months after the disappearance were of denial. Clara refused to say her brother had died. "He is missing." She would correct anyone who mentioned Eduardo's death. She transformed her small apartment into a private investigation center. Maps of the Maré complex covered an entire wall. Photos of the operation, newspaper clippings, police reports she obtained through her father's old contacts. She spent sleepless nights reviewing every detail, every witness testimony. "He was there, then he wasn't anymore," said a drug dealer arrested that night. "It was all very fast, very confusing," declared another police officer. Her father couldn't bear it. 6 months after Eduardo's disappearance, Antonio Menezes suffered a massive heart attack while looking at old photos of his son. Clara became truly alone. The man who raised her, who shaped her character with his calloused police officer hands, departed without certainty of his son's fate. On his deathbed, between breaths cut short by the pain in his chest, he whispered, "Find the truth, Clara. Find your brother." Camila, Eduardo's fiancée, tried to get close to Clara after Mr. Menezes' death. They had been friends before. Now they shared the same pain. But it was difficult to look into Camila's eyes and not see the reflection of hopelessness. Gradually, their meetings became rarer. 2 years after Eduardo's disappearance, Camila announced she would move to Portugal. "I can't live among ghosts anymore," she said during her last visit to Clara's house. The two cried together finally, not for the loss of Eduardo, but for the loss of each other. Clara continued teaching at the university, but her passion for literature had transformed. Now she was interested only in stories of disappearances, of people who vanished without a trace. Her students noticed how she became animated when discussing Kafka's The Trial, or how her eyes sparkled when analyzing Edgar Allan Poe's unsolved mysteries. Academic life became her refuge and her prison, four walls where she could talk about absences without revealing her own. 5 years passed. Clara still maintained the investigation wall in her apartment, although she no longer updated it as frequently. She still occasionally visited the Marais complex, always with Eduardo's photo in hand, always with the same questions. People already knew her, no longer startled by the woman who looked like the female version of the missing police officer. Some felt pity, others irritation. "We've told you everything we know, ma'am," they would say, and Clara would nod, thank them, and return home empty-handed. It was during this period that Chief Inspector Martins, the same one who had given her the fateful news years earlier, sought her out. Now retired, with completely white hair and a new scar on his chin, he seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. "I found something that might interest you," he said, handing over a brown envelope. Inside was a confidential report on undercover police operations. Eduardo's name was underlined in a list of potential agents for a specific mission, dated 3 months before his disappearance. "What does this mean?" asked Clara, her heart racing for the first time in years. "It might mean nothing," Martins replied, avoiding her gaze. "Or it might mean your brother was involved in something bigger than any of us imagined." Clara spent the following weeks trying to decipher this new enigma. Eduardo, an undercover agent. Was it possible that the disappearance, the supposed death, was part of a covert operation? Hope, dormant for so long, began to pulse in her chest again. She returned to frequenting the police station, pressuring Eduardo's old colleagues, traversing every inch of the Marais complex with renewed eyes. It was during one of these incursions that she met Matthias, an ex-drug dealer serving probation. Tall, thin, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow, he approached her after seeing her showing Eduardo's photo for the 100th time in the same bar. "I was there that night," he said simply. Clara felt her legs weaken. After so many years, someone who actually witnessed the moment. Matthias told her he was just a soldier in the drug trafficking hierarchy. He was on guard at the building entrance when the operation began. He saw when Eduardo and 2 other officers entered shooting. He saw when the explosion happened. "But something doesn't make sense," he said, frowning. "Your brother wasn't in the place where the bomb exploded. He was further back, near the emergency stairs." Clara felt her blood run cold. "Are you sure about that?" "Absolutely. I saw him seconds before the explosion. He was retreating. Seemed like he was following another plan." Matthias's words rekindled Clara's obsession. If Eduardo wasn't at the epicenter of the explosion, how was his badge found there? She returned to her investigation wall with renewed energy. New maps, new clippings, new theories. Chief Martins, now her confidant in this search, brought more documents, more fragmented clues of a story that refused to make sense. 7 years after the disappearance, Clara received an anonymous call. The voice, distorted by some type of modifier, was direct. "Stop looking for your brother. Some truth should not be found." The threat came with an envelope left at her door. Inside, photos of Clara during her recent visits to the Marais complex, in her conversations with Matthias, in her meetings with Martins. Someone was watching her. Someone wanted her to stop. Clara didn't stop. The threat only confirmed what she already suspected. There was more to Eduardo's story than a simple accident in the line of duty. She hired a private detective, a former student who now worked with digital investigations. "We need to find traces that aren't on the streets," she explained. "If my brother is alive, if he fled or was taken, there must be some sign somewhere." The detective, Ricardo, was meticulous and discreet. He began by investigating Eduardo's finances before the disappearance. He discovered small, regular deposits into a secondary account, amounts that didn't correspond to a police officer's salary. He found records of calls to numbers that no longer existed, all made in the weeks preceding the fatal operation. "They are circumstantial clues," he admitted to Clara, "but they form an interesting pattern." 9 years have passed since that night of April 12th. Clara is no longer the same. Her hair, once as black as Eduardo's, now shows premature grey streaks. Sleepless nights have left permanent marks under her eyes. At 41, she seems to carry the weight of someone much older. She had given up on romantic relationships. The last boyfriend left her when he realized he was competing with the ghost of a missing brother. Her life was reduced to teaching, investigating, waiting. And then, on an ordinary September afternoon in 2022, while grading academic papers, her phone vibrated with an Instagram notification. Ricardo, the detective, had tagged Clara in a comment. "Check your email immediately." The tone of urgency alarmed her. She opened her email app with trembling fingers. Ricardo's message contained just an image and a phrase. "Is it him?" Clara felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. The photo showed a middle-aged man on a beach. Longer hair, graying beard, skin tanned by the sun. But the eyes, those eyes she knew as her own. It was Eduardo. Older, transformed, but undeniably her twin brother. The photo had been posted on the profile of a woman named Adriana Vargas with the caption, "10 years with my love. Sebastian, new life in Punta. Sebastian Dimak, eternal love." Clara couldn't breathe. 10 years. The same amount of time since Eduardo's disappearance. The same amount of time she had lived between grief and hope. While she withered in her relentless search, her brother was living a new life somewhere called Punta, probably Punta del Este, Uruguay. While their father died of heartbreak, while Camila moved to another country to escape the memories, Eduardo smiled on a beach beside another woman. It was too late for anger. It was too late for relief. It was just too late. With trembling hands, Clara investigated Adriana Vargas's profile. It was private, but the cover photo showed the same beach from the other image, with a small inn in the background. New Horizon Inn. A quick internet search confirmed the establishment was in Punta del Este, Uruguay. Without thinking twice, Clara bought a plane ticket for the next day. The following 24 hours passed in a blur. Clara didn't tell anyone about her trip. She didn't tell Chief Martins, didn't inform the university, didn't respond to Ricardo's messages urging caution. She took only a backpack with essentials and all the savings she had accumulated over the years. On the plane, between periods of torpor and anxiety attacks, she wondered what she would say when she found her brother. What words could express 10 years of abandonment? What explanation could justify the suffering of so many people? Punta del Este received her with an impeccable blue sky and a sea breeze that under any other circumstance would have been comforting. Clara went directly to the New Horizon Inn, a small establishment with a white facade a few meters from the beach. With her heart hammering against her chest, she approached the reception. A smiling young woman attended to her. "Good morning, how can I help you?" "I'm looking for a couple," Clara replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Adriana Vargas and—" She hesitated. "Her husband." The receptionist smiled more broadly. "Oh, Adriana and Miguel. They're the owners. Adriana is in town buying supplies, but Miguel should be in the back tending to the garden." Miguel. He had even changed his name. Clara felt a wave of nausea. Miguel. Such a common name, so anonymous. So different from Eduardo Menezes, decorated police officer, Antonio's son, Clara's brother, Camila's fiancé. Can I speak with him?" Clara asked, feeling her legs weaken. "Of course, I'll call him. Who should I say is here?" The question caught her off guard. Who was she to Eduardo now? A sister? A stranger? A ghost from the past he deliberately left behind? "Just say it's an old acquaintance from Brazil," Clara finally replied. The receptionist disappeared through a side door, leaving Clara alone with her whirlwind of emotions. She looked around. The inn was cozy, decorated with light colors and marine motifs. On the walls, photographs of beaches, boats, sunsets. In one of them, Clara recognized Adriana, smiling next to a man with his back turned, looking at the sea. The life Eduardo had chosen instead of his own. The minutes dragged on like hours. Clara almost gave up, almost fled from there, never to return. Then the door opened, and there he was, thinner than she remembered, skin more wrinkled around the eyes, those eyes that were identical to hers, a body that aged separately from hers, when for 32 years they had been perfect mirrors of each other. Eduardo, or Miguel as he now called himself, froze upon seeing her. All the blood seemed to drain from his face, leaving him as pale as a corpse. Ironic, thought Clara, that he now looked more dead than when he was declared as such. "Clara," he whispered, an almost inaudible sound. "Eduardo," she replied, her voice firmer than it had been in the last 10 years. They stood like that, separated by a few meters and a decade of absence, looking at each other as if contemplating their own distorted images in a broken mirror. It was Eduardo who finally moved. He glanced quickly at the receptionist, who was observing the scene with curiosity, and then at the entrance door. "Let's talk on the beach," he said, passing by Clara without touching her. She followed him in silence. They walked on the warm sand to a more secluded spot, where some rocks formed a small cove. The sea beat gently against the stones, creating a constant melody that contrasted with the inner chaos both felt. "How did you find me?" Eduardo was the first to speak, looking at the horizon instead of his sister. "A photo on Instagram. Your wife posted a celebration of 10 years together." Eduardo closed his eyes, as if struck by a physical blow. "Adriana always wanted a social media presence to promote the inn. I was always against it." "Now I understand why," Clara replied, unable to contain the cutting tone. Finally, Eduardo looked at her. His eyes were teary. "You don't understand anything, Clara." "Then make me understand." The explosion of anger surprised her as much as him. "Make me understand why my twin brother faked his own death, why he let our father die of heartbreak, why he abandoned everyone who loved him." Eduardo took a step back, as if the words had physically pushed him. "Dad, he died 6 months after you died. Heart attack." His last thoughts were of the son he believed he had lost in the line of duty. Tears finally overflowed from Eduardo's eyes. He sat heavily on one of the rocks, covering his face with his hands. "I never wanted this. I never imagined." "What did you want then? What could justify all of this?" Clara remained standing, fists clenched at her sides, preventing herself from touching him, from comforting him as she would have years ago. Eduardo took several deep breaths before answering. When he finally spoke, his voice was controlled, distant. "I was working undercover, not as a police officer but for the Brazilian intelligence agency. I had been doing it for 2 years when that operation in the Mare complex happened." Clara blinked, confused. The report Martins had found, the mysterious deposits Ricardo discovered. The pieces were starting to fit together. "My mission was to track a weapons route that left Brazil for terrorist groups abroad. I was close, very close to discovering the main people involved. And then the information leaked that I was a double agent. The operation in Mare wasn't supposed to happen that night," Eduardo completed. "It was moved up to catch me off guard. When I realized it was a trap, it was already too late. 2 officers died trying to protect me." Clara felt her legs weaken. She sat on a rock facing her brother. "And the explosion?" "Planned to eliminate me. I was already on the emergency stairs when it happened. A 3rd agent, whom no one in the police knew about, got me out of there. We went directly to a safe location. The order was clear. Eduardo Menezes needed to officially die so that the operation could continue and my life could be preserved. For 10 years, Eduardo. 10 years without a phone call, without a sign of life. I would understand a few months, maybe even a year, but a decade." Eduardo's face contorted in an expression of pain so deep that Clara could almost physically feel it. "In the beginning, it was for safety. Then I met Adriana. She was a Uruguayan agent assigned to accompany me in exile. We fell in love. We built a life here, and the more time passed, the easier it was to pretend your old life never existed," Clara completed, bitterness dripping in every word. "No, it was never easy, Clara. There wasn't a day I didn't think about you, about Dad, about Camila. But what could I offer you? A life of fear, of constantly looking over your shoulder, of never knowing when someone might show up to finish the job." "You could offer the truth," Clara replied simply. "As bad as it might be, it would be better than the uncertainty that consumed us all these years." They remained silent for long minutes, only the sound of the waves filling the space between them. Clara observed her brother, the graying hair, the wrinkles around his eyes, hands calloused from a different job than he used to do. So much lost time, so many birthdays, Christmases, moments that could never be recovered. "How is Camila?" Eduardo finally asked, his voice low. "She moved to Portugal 2 years after your funeral. We haven't kept in touch." Eduardo nodded slowly. "And you? How has your life been?" The question was so absurd, so disproportionate to the situation that Clara almost laughed. "My life? My life has been an endless search for answers. My life has been waking up every day and wondering where you were, what really happened, if you were suffering or really dead. My life has been a wait, Eduardo, a wait that ended today." "Clara, No," she interrupted him, suddenly standing up. "I don't want to hear that you're sorry. or that you wish you had done things differently. It doesn't matter anymore. I came here to confirm you were alive, to finally put an end to this story. And now I know." Eduardo also stood up, taking a hesitant step toward his sister. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going back to Brazil. I'm finally going to move on with my life." "Are you going to tell anyone about me?" The question hung in the air, heavy, loaded with implications. Clara studied her brother's face, the fear in his eyes, the tension in his posture. He was still afraid. After 10 years, he still feared his past would catch up with him. "No," she finally replied. "Your secret is safe with me. Eduardo Menezes will remain dead. Miguel de, whatever your last name is now, can continue his peaceful life in this paradise." "Clara, don't go like this. We can try to rebuild some kind of relationship. You could visit, meet Adriana. We have a 7-year-old son, your nephew. His name is Antonio, like Dad." The mention of a nephew she had never met, who carried her father's name, was like a stab in Clara's chest. A son. Eduardo had built an entire family while she withered in the solitude of her obsessive search. A new Antonio Menezes was growing thousands of miles away from her, not knowing he had an aunt, not knowing the true story of his father or his namesake grandfather. "You gave our father's name to your son, but you didn't have the courage to tell him that his grandfather died believing he had lost you," Clara said, each word like an ice cube. "What kind of tribute is that, Eduardo?" He had no answer for that. How could he? Clara saw in his eyes, those eyes so similar to hers, that he knew there was no possible justification. There was no explanation that could erase 10 years of mourning, of searching, of sleepless nights examining every detail of a fabricated mystery. "Goodbye, Eduardo," she said, turning her back to begin walking back to the inn. "Miguel," his voice reached her. "My name is Miguel now." Clara stopped but didn't turn around. "To the world, perhaps. To me, you'll always be Eduardo, the brother I lost twice, once to death, once to the life you chose." She continued walking, feeling the sea breeze dry the tears that now flowed freely down her face. Behind her, Eduardo, or Miguel, it didn't matter now, remained motionless among the rocks, a solitary silhouette against the infinite horizon of the ocean. Back at the hotel, Clara spent the night wide awake, staring at the ceiling, mentally replaying every moment of the meeting with her brother. There was so much she wanted to have said, so many questions that remained unanswered. But there was also a deep weariness, a soul exhaustion that said, enough. 10 years of searching, of obsession, had ended not with the resolution she imagined, but with a truth even more painful than uncertainty. In the morning, she checked her phone. Several messages from Ricardo, the detective, asking if everything was okay, if she needed help. A missed call from Chief Martins. The world she had left behind continued turning, oblivious to the revolution happening inside her. Clara had breakfast alone in a small cafe near the hotel. From there she could see the beach, where she had talked with Eduardo the day before. Some families were already occupying the sand, children running in the shallow water, couples holding hands. Normal lives, simple lives. For a fleeting moment she imagined what it would have been like if Eduardo had shared the truth years ago. Maybe she would have understood. Maybe they could have maintained some kind of secret contact. Maybe she could have known little Antonio since his birth. So many maybes that were now lost forever. Her flight back was scheduled for late afternoon. Clara decided to take one last walk around the city before leaving. She walked through the charming streets of Punta del Este, observing the shops, restaurants, smiling tourists. This was the setting Eduardo had chosen for his new life. A beautiful, peaceful place, far from the violence and chaos of Rio de Janeiro. Under other circumstances, she would have loved it. Without realizing it, her steps led her back to the New Horizon Inn. She stopped across the street, observing the white facade, the colorful flowers in the entrance vases, the handcrafted sign with the establishment's name. A small paradise built on lies. As she watched, the inn's door opened. A woman came out, holding a boy's hand. Clara felt her heart stop. Even from a distance, she could see the boy was the perfect image of Eduardo as a child. The same dark, rebellious hair, the same confident walk. It was like going back in time and seeing herself with her brother, running through the yard of the house where they grew up. The woman, Adriana, Clara presumed, was beautiful in a gentle way. Wavy brown hair falling over her shoulders, a kind smile as she talked with her son. They seemed happy, carefree, They didn't know they were being observed by the twin sister of the man they knew as Miguel. Clara felt a sudden temptation to cross the street, to introduce herself, to meet the nephew she never knew existed. What harm would it do? Eduardo already knew she had found him. The damage, if any, was already done. But then the boy turned his face in her direction, and Clara froze. Those eyes, the same eyes she and Eduardo shared, their father's eyes. The connection was so strong, so visceral, that Clara took an instinctive step back, partially hiding behind a tree. The boy continued looking in her direction for a few seconds, as if he felt something, as if some primitive instinct told him there was a bond with that stranger across the street. Then Adriana called his attention, and the moment passed. Clara watched as they walked away down the sidewalk, diminishing until they became just distant points. Her nephew, blood of her blood. A piece of Eduardo that would continue to exist, to grow, to live, long after all this drama had been forgotten. There was something comforting about that continuity, even if she would never be part of it. With a deep sigh, Clara turned around and walked in the opposite direction. Her flight to Brazil would depart in a few hours. She had a life to rebuild, a future to plan. 10 years was too long to remain trapped in the past. At the airport, waiting to board, Clara did something she hadn't planned. She took her phone and called Chief Martins. When he answered, his voice was tense, worried. "Clara? Where are you? We're all concerned." "I'm fine," she replied, surprising herself with the calmness in her own voice. "I needed to resolve some things. I'm heading home now. Ricardo told me about the photo. Did you find anything?" Clara hesitated. For a moment, the whole truth was on the tip of her tongue. Eduardo is alive. He faked his own death. He has a new family. He never wanted to come back. Words that would change everything, that would set in motion events she couldn't control. "No," she finally lied. It was a false alarm, just someone who looked similar. Martin's sigh was a mixture of relief and disappointment. "I'm sorry, Clara. I know how much you wanted to find answers. It's okay. I'm actually at peace with it now." And the strangest thing was that, in a way, she really was. Not in the way she had imagined, not with the clean and satisfying closure she had always dreamed of, but there was a kind of peace in finally knowing, in no longer having to wonder, in being able to move forward without constantly looking back. "When are you coming back?" Martins asked. "I'll be in Rio tonight. We can talk tomorrow." "Of course. Rest, Clara. You deserve it." Clara hung up, looking out the airport window at the blue sky of Punta del Este. Somewhere in that city, Eduardo, no Miguel, continued his life. Perhaps right now he was telling Adriana about his twin sister's reappearance. Perhaps he was wondering if Clara would keep her word to guard his secret. Perhaps he was just continuing his day as if nothing had happened, an ability he had clearly developed over the years. The flight to Rio de Janeiro was smooth. Clara slept most of the time, a deep and dreamless sleep, such as she hadn't had in years. When the plane landed, it was already night. The city lights shone intensely, familiar and strange at the same time. She took a taxi directly to her apartment. Opening the door to her home was like entering a museum of her obsession. The investigation wall was still there, covering almost all the space in the living room. Maps, photos, newspaper clippings, reports. 10 years of relentless searching condensed into paper and string. Clara turned on the light and stood observing that monument to her own obstinacy. For the first time, she managed to see it through a stranger's eyes, the silent madness her life had become. With decisive movements, she began to take everything off the wall. Each photo, each clipping, each map. She tore some up, threw others directly in the trash. Some pieces, the family photos, the genuine mementos, she carefully placed in a box. She worked methodically until the wall was clean, empty, ready to receive a new story. When she finished, it was already past midnight. Clara sat on the sofa, physically and emotionally exhausted. Her phone vibrated with a notification. It was a text message from an unknown number. "Thank you for keeping my secret. I know I don't deserve it, but it means a lot. If you ever want to really meet Antonio, we'll be here. With love, E." Clara looked at the message for a long time. E, not Miguel. Hey for Eduardo. A small acknowledgement of who he really was, of who he would always be to her. She didn't reply. Maybe one day she would. Maybe one day the pain would be less, and curiosity about her nephew would overcome resentment. But not today. Today, she needed to begin rebuilding her own life, free from the ghost that had haunted her for a decade. The next morning, Clara woke up with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. She showered, prepared a hearty breakfast, opened the windows to let the fresh air in. Her apartment seemed bigger without the investigation wall, somehow brighter. She picked up the phone and called the university coordination. "Professor Silvio, it's Clara Menezes. I'm calling to find out if that sabbatical proposal is still available." The sabbatical was something she had been postponing for years. An opportunity to spend a year studying in Portugal, at the same university where she had done her doctorate. She always found excuses not to go, and the main one was not wanting to move away from her investigation of Eduardo. "Clara, what a pleasant surprise. Yes, the offer is still valid. We would need to organize some details, but we could plan your departure for next semester." "That would be perfect," she replied, feeling a wave of anticipation for the first time in a long time. "Thank you, Silvio." Afterward, she called Ricardo, the detective who had helped her find Eduardo. He answered on the first ring, anxious. "Clara, are you okay? What happened? You simply disappeared." "I'm fine, Ricardo, and I want to thank you for everything you did. You went beyond what I could have expected." "So, was it really your brother in the photo?" Clara took a deep breath. The lie was already formed, ready to be told. It would be so easy to repeat what she said to Martins, that it was just someone who looked similar, a false alarm. But something in her relationship with Ricardo, his dedication to her lost cause, deserved more. "Yes, it was him," she finally admitted. "But the story is complicated, Ricardo, and I can't go into details. All I can say is that now I know what I need to know, and I'm ready to move on." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I understand," Ricardo finally said. "If that's what you want, I respect your decision, and if you ever need to talk, you'll be the first to know," she completed, with a smile he couldn't see. "Now I need to ask one more favor. All the digital files we collected, all the records of our investigation, I want you to delete everything." "Clara, are you sure? Those are years of work." "Absolutely. I don't need them anymore." After hanging up, Clara prepared for the last difficult meeting of the day. Lunch with Chief Martins. He chose a quiet restaurant in the city center, where they used to meet to discuss Eduardo's case. When Clara arrived, he was already there, more aged than she remembered, more tired too. "How was the trip?" he asked after initial greetings. "Enlightening," she answered honestly. "Not in the way I expected, but enlightening." Martins studied her carefully. "You're different, more light." Clara smiled. "I'm tired of carrying ghosts, Martins. 10 years is too long to live in the past." "So you're really giving up the investigation? After so long?" "It's not giving up, it's accepting. Eduardo is gone. Whatever happened that night in the Marais complex, it doesn't matter anymore. He's not coming back." Martins took her hand across the table, a paternal gesture that surprised Clara. "Your brother would be proud of the woman you've become, Clara, of your strength, your determination." The words hit her with an irony that Martins could never comprehend. Eduardo, or Miguel, probably had other feelings about her determination. Relief that she finally gave up? Fear that she might change her mind? Gratitude for the promised silence? She would never really know. "I'm taking a sabbatical year," she announced, changing the subject. "I'm going to Portugal next semester." "Portugal, that's wonderful, Clara. A change of scenery will do you good." "Yes, it will. And who knows, maybe I'll look for Camila while I'm there." Martins nodded, approving the idea. Closures are important, for everyone involved. After lunch, Clara walked unhurriedly through the streets of Rio. The city seemed different now, as if she saw it with new eyes. For so long, every corner, every alley, every abandoned building was a possible hiding place for clues about Eduardo. Now they were just corners, alleys, buildings. An ordinary city, with its beauty and its scars, moving forward, as everything always does. She stopped in front of a travel agency window. Colorful posters announced exotic destinations, last-minute promotions, adventures waiting to happen. One of them showed a beach in Portugal. Without thinking too much, Clara entered the agency. 6 months later, Clara was disembarking at Lisbon Airport. The sabbatical had been approved, the apartment in Rio rented to cover part of the expenses in Europe. She carried only 2 suitcases, one with clothes, the other with books and research materials, for the work she planned to develop during the year. Portugal welcomed her with an overcast sky and a fine drizzle, typical of the European autumn. Clara didn't mind. There was something comforting about the cooler climate, so different from the constant heat of Rio de Janeiro. A new landscape for a new phase of her life. Her small apartment was in the Alfama district, overlooking the Tagus. In the first days, Clara dedicated herself to exploring the city, meeting her colleagues at the university, establishing a routine that didn't include old obsessions. The nights were still difficult. The silence brought back the doubts, the unanswered questions, the image of Eduardo Miguel in his new life in Uruguay. But each morning was a little easier than the one before. 3 weeks after her arrival, she finally gathered the courage to do what she had postponed since stepping in Portugal. She called the number Ricardo had managed to track down years ago, Camilla's contact in Lisbon. To her surprise, Camilla was still using the same number, and even more surprising, she wanted to meet Clara immediately. They arranged to meet at a cafe near Rocio for the next day. When Clara arrived at the venue, her heart was beating erratically. It had been so many years since she last saw her brother's former fiancé. What version of Camilla would she find? The same young woman devastated by loss, or someone who, as Clara was trying to do now, had moved on? The answer came when an elegant woman waved from a table at the back of the cafe. Camilla was different. Shorter hair, some expression lines around her eyes, but her smile remained the same, warm and sincere. Beside her, a girl of approximately 7 years was carefully coloring a drawing book. Clara felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. The girl had Eduardo's eyes. "Clara," Camilla stood up to hug her. "It's so good to see you after so long." The hug was long, loaded with unspoken emotions. When they separated, Camilla indicated the girl at her side. "This is Luisa, my daughter. Luisa, say hello to Aunt Clara. She came from Brazil to visit us." The girl raised her eyes from the drawing, those unmistakable eyes, and smiled shyly. "Hello, Aunt Clara." "Aunt." The word hit Clara like a punch. She looked questioningly at Camilla, who nodded almost imperceptibly, confirming the unasked question. "Luisa, why don't you go ask for a hot chocolate for yourself?" Camilla suggested, handing some coins to her daughter. When the girl moved away, she turned to Clara. "I was 2 months pregnant when Eduardo disappeared. I hadn't told anyone yet, not even him." Clara felt the world spin around her. "You had a daughter from Eduardo, a daughter he never knew existed." Camilla nodded, her eyes teary. "When I heard about his death, I thought about having an abortion. I didn't know if I would have the strength to raise a child alone, with the face of the man I lost. But then I realized it was the only thing I had left of him, the only part of Eduardo that would continue to live." "And you never told me," Clara whispered, feeling a confusing mixture of emotions: anger, sadness, joy for the existence of the niece she never knew she had. "Forgive me, Clara. In the first months after the loss, you were so consumed by your search, so certain that Eduardo was alive somewhere. I feared that if I told you, you would transfer that obsession to Luisa. And later, when I decided to move to Portugal, it seemed easier to make a clean break, to start completely over." Clara looked at the girl, now animatedly chatting with the barista. 7 years old, the same age as Eduardo's son in Uruguay. Cousins who would never meet, children of a man who for one of them was dead, and for the other simply Daddy. "Does she know about her father?" Clara asked. "She knows he was a police officer and died in the line of duty, that he was brave and good. I show her photos, tell her stories. I want her to grow up knowing who he was." "Who he was?" Clara repeated, the words carrying a weight that Camilla could not comprehend. Luisa returned to the table, carefully carrying a cup of hot chocolate. She sat down and continued her drawing, occasionally casting curious glances at Clara. "How long are you staying in Portugal, Aunt Clara?" the girl suddenly asked. "A year, sweetheart. I'm doing work at the university." "Cool, so we can see each other many times." Luisa smiled broadly. Eduardo smiled the same smile Clara had seen on Antonio's face from a distance in Punta del Este. "Yes," Clara replied, feeling tears in her eyes. "We will see each other many times." The conversation continued, light on the surface, heavy between the lines. Camilla told about her work as a translator, about the life she had built in Lisbon. Clara talked about the university, about her plans for the year, carefully avoiding any mention of her trip to Uruguay or what she had discovered there. When they said goodbye, Camilla hugged Clara again. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. "I always thought Luisa deserved to know her paternal family. You are the only connection she has to Eduardo. The words were innocent but hit Clara like arrows. If Camilla knew the truth, if she knew that Eduardo was alive, raising another child, just a flight away, the knowledge was too heavy a burden to carry. On the way back to her apartment, Clara was haunted by a new understanding of the complexity of what she had discovered. It wasn't just about Eduardo having faked his death, having abandoned his old life. It was about the lives that formed around his absence. The daughter he never knew, the sister who dedicated a decade to searching for him, the fiancée who moved on believing she was a widow before she even married. And now, Clara was the only one who knew all sides of the story, the only one who knew about Antonio in Uruguay and Luisa in Portugal, the only one who carried the weight of so many conflicting truths. That night, after much hesitation, Clara took her phone and sent a message to the number Eduardo had used to contact her months earlier. There are things you need to know, things that would change everything, but it's not for me to decide if these truths should come to light. I just want you to know that your choices created ripples you could never have imagined. I hope it was worth it. She didn't expect a response, and she didn't receive one. Perhaps Eduardo had changed his number. Perhaps he had decided to cut this last tie to his previous life as well. It didn't matter. The message was more for herself than for him, an acknowledgement that the truth, as important as it had been to Clara for so many years, wasn't always a gift that everyone wanted or deserved to receive. In the months that followed, Clara built a new routine. She taught at the university 3 days a week. On weekends, she often met with Camilla and Luisa. Trips to the zoo, visits to museums, afternoons at the nation's park. Gradually, she built a relationship with the niece she never knew existed, enchanted by the mixture of Eduardo and Camilla that the girl represented. The pain of her brother's betrayal hadn't completely disappeared, but it had become more bearable with time. In some moments, Clara could even understand, if not completely forgive, the choice he had made. The fear, the opportunity to start over, the exhaustion of a life of constant danger. If she had been in his place, would she have acted differently? One day, almost 9 months after her arrival in Portugal, Clara received an unexpected email. The sender was a name she didn't recognize, Miguel Vargas, but the subject made her freeze. Antonio wants to meet his aunt. The body of the email was brief. Clara, Antonio's birthday is in 3 weeks. He knows I have a twin sister who lives very far away. Recently, he's been asking many questions about you. Adriana and I have talked, and we would like to invite you to come to Punta for his birthday. I know it's asking a lot after everything, but it would be meaningful for him, and for me. Miguel. Clara read and reread the message several times. Eduardo, now using the name Miguel even in his communication with her, was extending an olive branch. He was offering the chance to meet her nephew, to be part of, even if peripherally, the life he had built far from her. For days, Clara debated internally about what to do. Going to Punta would mean accepting in some way Eduardo's choice. It would mean transforming his lie into part of her own life. Could she look into Antonio's eyes knowing that, just a few thousand kilometers away, there was a girl with the same eyes who would never know her father? The answer came unexpectedly during a walk with Luisa on the beach of Cascais. The girl, now more comfortable with her aunt, talked non-stop about school, about friends, about her dreams of becoming a veterinarian one day. Suddenly she stopped and looked seriously at Clara. "Aunt, do you think my dad would be proud of me?" The question, so simple and so complex at the same time, caught Clara off guard. She looked at her niece, those eyes, that smile that were the perfect echo of Eduardo. "I'm absolutely certain he would, Luisa. He would be so proud he wouldn't know how to express it." That night, Clara responded to Eduardo's email. "Miguel, I won't be able to come to Antonio's birthday. My work at the university doesn't allow for travel at this time, but I want you to know that I think of him and of you frequently. Maybe someday we can find a way to unite our separate lives without hurting anyone else in the process. Until then, live well. Be happy. It's all I can wish for you now. Clara." It was a half-truth. Work at the university really kept her busy, but it wouldn't prevent her from traveling if she really wanted to. The real reason why Clara couldn't go to Punta was that she had promised to take Luisa to the Lisbon Oceanarium that same weekend, a commitment she wouldn't break for anything in this world. Clara sent the email and closed the laptop. She looked out the window of her apartment in Alfama, at the Tagus shining under the moonlight. Life was made of choices, of paths that divide, of truths that sometimes need to remain hidden to protect those we love. Eduardo had chosen his path 10 years ago. Clara now chose hers. It wasn't the perfect closure she had imagined for so many years. It wasn't the complete justice or truth she had so obstinately sought. It was imperfect, complicated, contradictory, as real life always is. She didn't know what the future held, if one day Antonio and Luisa would meet, if Eduardo would ever know about the daughter he left behind, if she herself would find complete peace with all the conflicting truths she now carried. But for the first time in a decade, the future didn't frighten her. There were no more ghosts to chase, only real, imperfect people to love. It was too late to go back. It was too late to fix everything that had been broken, but it wasn't too late to move forward, to build something new from the fragments of the past. It wasn't too late to find beauty in the ruins, hope in the scars, love in the losses. That night, Clara slept deeply, without dreams, without nightmares. When she woke up, the Lisbon sun was coming through the window, painting the room with golden light. A new day, a new opportunity, and for the first time in 10 years, Clara Menezes was completely present in it, without looking back, without chasing ghosts, just living, imperfect, wounded, but finally free. And you? What would you do if you discovered that someone you loved your whole life faked their own death to escape something? Would you trust in the tragedy or seek the hidden truth, even knowing that some answers might be more painful than uncertainty? Leave your comment, subscribe to the channel for more thought-provoking stories, and share if this narrative touched your heart.